go. It's time to start. My name's Natasha Nurse. If you don't already know who I am, I'm the owner and co-founder of Dressing Room 8, a coaching and consulting business. Essentially, I wanted to create a business that was all about empowering women to be their most authentic self and to do what they want. So whether it's to be an author, to be a writer, to be a coach themselves, to be an artist, to be a mother, whatever, fill in the blank, as I like to say. We all want to do certain things in our life, but a lot of times we struggle with getting the information or the tools and techniques. And so I'm here to be that gap filler, and it's been a wonderful ride. Started everything in 2015, and here we are in 2018 in June. I can't believe we're halfway through the year. So with that little intro, please feel free to invite friends, family members. Today's topic is all about consumption of media. We are what we consume. So talking about some information that I came across that I thought would be kind of fun to talk about. This is a conversation. It's a kind of real talk conversation for lunch, right? As we eat our salads, eat our burgers, eat whatever we're eating. It's always good to, I think, to consume positivity throughout the day, and why not do it during our lunchtime? So with that, let's get started. I came across a website by Heidi Cohen on HeidiCohen.com where she talks about 5 different types of content consumption. And so if this is something familiar to you, feel free to add in your tips and your thoughts on it. But she essentially talks about if you go on the website, it's HeidiCohen.com, and it's 5 types of content consumption. And she's talking about how we have focused consumption, which is where we're concentrating our attention on one thing, one type of content on one device, right? So what would that be? That would be like looking at Facebook on your phone, right? Or looking at a website or a blog on a computer, right? One type of content on one device. Then there's something called dual content consumption, which is where you're looking, using 2 or more devices at the same time. So that's super easy, right? That's like your phone and your watch, or the computer and your phone, or, your tablet and your phone, right? So 2 different devices. This is the quote unquote classic multitasking that so many of us find ourselves doing because there's just so much content out there, right? So that's that. We also have information snacking, which is interesting. That's the use of otherwise wasted content. So I guess that would be kind of when we're going through our Facebook streams, right? And just looking at random stuff, but it's not like one type of directive search that you're doing. You're just kind of viewing and kind of snacking, right? You're just kind of grazing the internet. Another type is time shifted content. So this is postponing content consumption to later. I think we all can relate to that, right? So when you want to follow, maybe you follow Dressing Room 8, my blog, or you follow another type of blog or vlog, and you're like, oh, I can't watch it until after 6 p.m. because that's pretty much when your day settles down a little bit more. You're transporting yourself back from work to home. And so you can say, oh, okay, I can listen to the podcast. I can go through my feed. I can, right? So you've kind of scheduled out for yourself as to when you're going to consume content. And then lastly, content binging, which is when you're consuming multiple portions in a single session. So what does that sound like? That sounds like the Netflix binge, right? Where we're like, can't get enough of this. Oh my gosh, I need so much of it, right? And so I think so many of us are guilty of that. But I think it's interesting to, when even I was collecting this information, to just think about the ways that we're consuming, because a lot of times I think that we need to be mindful about what we're doing, right? And understand what we're doing. It's not just this random quirk, right, that you do, but so many of us are having similar behavior. So those are 5 common ways of how we consume content. And then next, I saw on contentmarketinginstitute.com a really interesting article about the 21 types of content that we crave. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will mention 10, and we'll kind of talk through that. And again, this is a conversation, so feel free as you're eating and you're enjoying your mid-time day snack or whatnot, and maybe you're not eating and you're just working, and I'm just hungry, so I envision eating at this moment. What are different types of content that people crave? So one being, it reminds us that life is short. Ain't that the truth, right? We are here and then we are gone. reminds us that that dreams can come true. I think that that's very true. A lot of those viral videos, I think, are when we see people who have something totally unexpected happen in their life in such an incredible, gracious manner, and it moves us and we're crying and it's, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Where can I donate? This is awesome, right? Like that type of content. Faith to believe in bigger things, right? So I think that that's kind of speaking to, the idea of maybe spirituality, right? Religion, content related to a higher purpose in life, right? Things that we believe in. So there's that. And then also content that reminds us that we matter. So that's important because I think that there's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of feelings of isolation, feelings that there's no one relating to you and what you're experiencing in this world, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, right? Maybe, dealing with motherhood issues, dealing with family matters, dealing with entrepreneurship journey, dealing with your 9-to-5 career, dealing with relationship stuff. A lot of us, I think, feel like we're just like in this on our own. And until we go out and reach out and try to look for content that's speaking to our narrative that is either a good thing, bad thing, or somewhere in between, we want to know, does anyone else feel this way? Does anyone else deal with this issue? Another thing is unexpected twists. I think that that's a fun one. I think that's similar to the first one, that it's like this kind of unexpected surprise of like wonderfulness. So, maybe you're going to be in a car accident. The person's going to be in a car accident, then they're not. And then they, win $1 million, right? Like something like super cool and different and unexpected, kind of like a movie. We like content that tells a story. Storytelling is key. I've definitely spoken about content about that. I think that more so now than ever, as a content creator myself, I'm constantly trying to develop content that is showcasing stories, not just information, right? That there's a beginning, middle, and end. And that when we communicate to people, the clarity comes from the types of stories that we're sharing and the meaningfulness, right? Why is this relevant to you? Why should you care, right? Because there's so much out there that when people are trying to speak with you, right, like in a live stream, there needs to be value to the content that you're absorbing, right? You're taking the time to watch this, so that's meaningful. And so I need to make sure that every time you do so, that I'm giving you what you need, giving you what you want, right? Because otherwise, why are you giving me your attention? You can be giving that to someone else. Hi there. Thanks for joining. And we also love content that inspires us to act, right? So a lot of what's been going on with politics, right? So we have this immigration crisis that's going on in this country, and it's probably exasperated by a lot of different things going on. If you get my drift. But I think that generally immigration is right has been a hot topic in this country for a while, right? So actions that where we can say people are now putting out content saying, hey, come out and protest. Hey, come out, or like the Me Too movement, right? The Time's Up thing. So content that's about, hey, your voice matters and we need you to join the cause is content that we crave. Also, content that makes us laugh or smile. What is this? We're talking puppies and kitties, guys, right? We cannot get enough of that. So that's really exciting. Content that encourages us to, let me just adjust. Okay. Content that encourages us to never give up. That's important, right? Because I think that a lot of the motivational videos that I'm seeing, it's been kind of interesting to see, where, like how certain people and celebrities that we love, they've been putting out content that is speaking to, some of the challenges that they dealt with, some of the struggles that they dealt with in their career to be that famous super duper star that they are. So I think that a common thread that I've seen a lot with, at least in the entertainment industry and business and really all industries, is that we struggle together. Our struggles might not be the same, but we all have struggles, right? I think that's a part of the journey, but not giving up is how you go from point A to point B, right? We can't just sit down and just call it quits. So definitely, I know that content usually gives me the rah, and I personally love it. And then also content that challenges our assumptions. That's interesting too, because there's a lot of people And I was just actually talking about this, about feminism, right? That's another hot topic in media where people say, oh, I'm not a feminist, you know, and it's like, okay, that's fine. You know, everyone's entitled to their own labels and declarations in life. But I'm proud to be a feminist, and I'm proud to try to put out content and be an example in the movement for Black feminists, for women feminists, as, you know, I support equality. Right? I support equality of genders, of races, of sexual orientation. I'm just a fan of equality. I think that life is too short not to give people the same rights and privileges, because we're all human beings. So thus we're all entitled to feel like such, right? And so, you know, feminism is one part of the equality conversation. I think other people have different definitions for the term. That's the definition that I go by. That's the definition that I live my life by. So, you know, content that challenges what other people, how other people view feminism and things like that. I think that that's really, really interesting. So now we talked about the different types of content we crave. Now, how do you think we are, how do you think we're spending our time, right? I think that's interesting. So if you go to medium.com, there's an article written by Farah. She wrote, "You Are What You Eat," which I love, love, love. That's phenomenal. And in as of September 2017, she shared a little kind of like infographic thing. And it said the average American spends 721 minutes per day with media. That's a lot of hours, right? There's 60 hours, 60 minutes in an hour. So 721 minutes, you know, we're talking 60 into that. That's like at least more than 10 hours, right? If not 12 or something. 12 hours a day, right? Like that's a lot of content on with media. Also, as of spring 2016, the numbers might be more now, I don't know, but she included the fact that the daily reach of television was over 75% of the population. So what does that mean? Like reaching TV. But I think that probably has reduced because of how now online TV streaming services have really dominated the space, and how we have a lot less people watching traditional television and are hooked up on the Netflix, on the Hulu, on the Quelly TV, all of that good stuff. And then also 21.7% of the population access magazines on a daily basis. So magazine print is definitely not what it used to be, right? I remember, if you are of the time where you remember the 90s, right, being where people were getting the magazines, and people are still obviously buying magazines. I'm a lifestyle editor for Plus Model Magazine. I love that people support magazines and the magazine platform, but it's definitely been changed and transformed by the digital age, right? So then another thing to keep in mind with consumption data, and then after I'm done with all of this data conversation, and again, if you have thoughts and things, feel free to chime in and, you know, just kind of add that in. But ultimately, you know, we have some interesting facts. First, smartphones are the preferred method of consumption. If you disagree, I'd like to know that. That'd be kind of interesting. Second, Facebook was and this was as of September 2017, Facebook was the leading social platform for mobile referrals. You had Facebook giving 16% of referred traffic, and then Google being 61% on a smartphone. And then also, you know, like I was just saying, TV is kind of, TV as we know it is kind of dead, which is sad. In some way, but it's, you know, things change, right? If you read the book Who Moved My Cheese, which you can find on dressingroomaid.com as a referral, you can, you know, you can see that change is not something that we have to mourn. It's something that we have to accept and embrace and see the value of why the change is happening. And so now, you know, 2/3 of consumers under the age of 35 report regular use of online streaming subscriptions to watch television, right? And that binge watching is very popular between people who are like ages 13 to 22, over 50% of consumers. So it's interesting, you know, so that's just some data on some consumption. And then lastly, on entrepreneur.com, it's a lot of data talk, but I think that this is important because if you happen to be a content creator, if you happen to be someone who is looking to understand why you're consuming the content that you're consuming, as well as understand how it's affecting you, it's important to know this data. It's important to know this research, right? So that's kind of why I wanted to lay out that groundwork first. But to continue, on entrepreneur.com, an article that I believe this was a 2017 article as well, it says the 10 common and effective emotional triggers. So why is this important? I like this article because it was essentially talking to the fact that people who are writing and creating content are what? They're intentionally trying to trigger certain types of emotions. And so what are some of these emotions that they're trying to trigger? So we have fear, right? So that's one. Guilt, trust, value, belonging, competition, instant gratification, leadership, trend setting, and time. Interesting stuff there, right? So those are 10 common emotional triggers. So if you think about that, the type of content that's affecting us, that's speaking to those different parts of us, right? Like if you're creating content and you're building a sense of fear in the person, what is that going to drive that person to do, right? Act on kind of a basis or a foundation of fear. Is that a good thing, bad thing? I will leave that up to you to decide, and we can talk about it, right? But so it's interesting that how content is affecting us, because it's based on what they're trying to speak to is what it's going to play a role in the emotions and the actions that we take. So now what do I want to give you next? 8 tips on how you can deal personally with your content consumption. So first and foremost, I think that you need to be curating your own content, or subscribing and tuning into someone who is curating content. As someone who my husband likes to call me the social media curator, right? Because I do a lot of curating for Dressing Room 8. If you go to facebook.com/dr8fashion, or if you go and I'm also a podcast co-host with my husband on Woken Free. And so I do the content creation, the curation there. So I do a lot of content curation, meaning kind of pulling together content that I see on the internet and kind of putting it and sharing it out there, right? Whether it's new movies coming out, whether it's artists to pay attention to, whether it's new concepts dealing with like mindset or mindfulness, right? Like what is going on, and just kind of distributing that content. And us, of course, fashion, right? At Dressing Room 8, because fashion is a big part of our personal and professional revolution and transformation in this world. Fashion plays a role. We don't live in a naked world. We got to get dressed, right? So you got to, be mindful of the type of fashion that you're using and how it can support you in your needs, and how certain brands are more mindful and more cognizant of that. So being an intentional curator. So either doing it yourself or paying attention to someone like me who can curate it for you is going to what? It's going to help you save time, right? So that you yourself aren't having to go through every feed, but instead you can just maybe go to certain pages, go to certain Instagram pages, certain Facebook pages, certain Twitter accounts, and you can look at the content that they're sharing and say, oh, okay, that's interesting knowledge for the day, right? That I've learned there. And multiple people, maybe one person, it depends on, what type of time you feel like investing. But I think ultimately you want to curate your content, because intentionality is going to be how you're going to prevent yourself from just mass exposure to content that you don't like, content that hurts your feelings, content that makes you feel a certain kind of way, content that is destructive for your body image, content that is destructive for your self-esteem, content that's destructive for how you view your career, how you view opportunities, right? What we think plays a role in the type of life we live. And what we think is what? Influenced by what we watch, what we read, what we see, what we experience. So the content that we're consuming is then having a role in our mindset, which is then playing a role in our activities. So that's why content consumption is not just like, oh, why are we talking about this? Because it plays a role in your life. It plays a role in how you live your life and what you're thinking and how educated and informed you are, right? So that's something as well. So there's that. I hope that that makes sense for everyone. And if anyone has any issues, let me know. Secondly, I would say you need to have a craving for positivity, right? Because a lot of times I think when we do come across positive content and we're like, oh my gosh, that's so inspiring. Oh, that's nice. And then we spend maybe it's disproportionate in the sense of like 70% of the content we're exposed to is negative, say, and this is just examples. I'm not like stating a report or anything like that, right? So say on average, you feel like 70% of content is negative that you're exposed to and 30% is positive. How do you think that's ultimately going to make your day go better, right? Do you think that you will feel more positive even though you're constantly thinking and being surrounded by and absorbing negative content? No, right? You're going to be in alignment with the proportion of what you're consuming, right? So is it possible to flip the switch and do 70% positive, 30% negative? Yeah, I think it is. It's just, it all depends on your intentionality, but at a bare minimum, let's try to go for like 60-40, right? Like, let's try to be on the positive side, of course. Not encouraging sadism. be sadistic, right? Like, yeah, crave the negativity. No, not at all. It's not going to make you feel better. It's not going to help the cause of life. So intentionality, but then also having a craving of positivity means that you're going to be more likely to seek out the positiveness. So when you are looking for the curation or you're curating yourself, you have a guise as to what to go under, right? And so I think that those are really two fun tips to think about. Thirdly, I would say the next thing that would be important for your content consumption is to make sure it's in alignment with your belief system, right? I think that I definitely remember, like, in my younger age, as well as even now, just having to, read something, and maybe it wasn't negative, right? Maybe it was just kind of informative, but it just didn't vibe with me the way that I wanted it to, right? So maybe you're reading content and it's informative and it's maybe interesting, but it's not necessarily something that's your cup of tea. Then why are you doing this, right? So like similar to the intentionality piece of things, it's okay to be kind of, how would I say, discerning, also to say no to things that you don't want to read about, to say no to things that, and maybe, like I said, it doesn't have to only come within the guise of positive versus negative, but it could just be something that, like, even if all your friends are reading, maybe Cosmo, right? Or something like that. And I love Cosmo, right? I love Cosmo, but like, maybe you're not a fan of reading about certain sex articles every month. Maybe that frequency is too much for you, or you feel just like overwhelmed by the subject, whatever reason you want to say, then maybe you can subscribe to a different magazine, or, look at content online that's a little bit more varied, right? And so I would say it's okay to say no, right? And so that's a principle that speaks to not just your content consumption, but also just like how you live your life, right? I think embracing the power of no is something that I've truly have enjoyed, and I encourage you to not say no as much as possible in light of The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. But it's okay to say no when you need to say no, right? And it's okay for you to draw those lines and to create those boundaries and say, at this time, I don't think that this is working for me, right? So saying no, third tip. Next, I would say, when it comes to your content consumption, give yourself, not necessarily a cutoff point, but just like have a healthy balance. And what do I mean by that? And I know that terminology can be a little controversial, because a lot of people will say there is no balance in things, which, there really isn't when it comes to certain behaviors or activities, right? Because we spend more time doing work than we don't. So it's like, how can you have a balance? You don't. You kind of create a sense of harmony. So we can use the term harmony if you prefer, but create a sense of harmony with yourself when it comes to content consumption and other priorities in your life. Right? So if you end up if you're one of these typical Americans who spend 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day consuming media, but then you feel like, or media, television, right? You can kind of loop in a couple of things, just consumption of content, right? We'll just call it that. Say you're doing 10 hours a day of content consumption, but you are struggling to write your book, right? This is something that you've wanted to do for the last 12 years of your life. Say you're one of those people. Okay. So what do? Do we continue living our life saying, oh, well, we can't do it. It's just, I haven't had the time. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I love that phrase. Or do we take a step back and look at our schedule? Do we look at how we're utilizing our time? How those 10 hours, and maybe obviously, I unless you, maybe have a very free, loose schedule, most likely that 10 to 12 hours of consumption of media and content is being distributed throughout your 24-hour day, right? So ultimately, maybe you start the day, the first hour of the day, which is not really healthy. And people, there's a lot of people who say that, that you shouldn't do that. But maybe you start the first hour of your day doing that. And then around maybe a lunchtime, maybe you're watching something like this, but then you go on and you keep doing it till like maybe 2:30. And then after work, oh, well, I'm traveling. My head is tired. I can't think or whatever. Okay. So my travel time is like an hour and a half or something like that. Okay. So then I'm doing that. And then as I'm cooking, okay, I'm going to consume. And then when I'm eating dinner, I'm just going to consume from like 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then, okay, maybe I need to check in emails, or maybe I have to deal with kids or dependents, right? And then before you know it, we're at like 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m. And then you didn't even get to address any of your goals that you had for writing 10 pages a day, writing for an hour, writing for 15 minutes a day, like whatever the goal that you have set for yourself to ultimately achieve and be able to get that book out. You're holding yourself back because you're too busy in this like content consumption journey. So am I saying don't consume content? Obviously not. You're watching this on a live stream. Like, right? That would be completely ludicrous for me to say that. Be like, stop being on Facebook. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But what I am saying is be strategic about the type of content that you're consuming. Because if you're consuming content, and obviously you have content for motivation, content for education, content for activation, content for not just education, but also like information and like being informed, right? Like whatever categories of spaces that you're in when it comes to your content consumption. But ultimately, when we also have content that's just like a waste of time, right? That information snacking thing, do we need to do that, right? Do we need to do that? Or should we be writing that book? Should we be pitching those 5 brands to work with if you're an influencer? Should you be developing that invention that you've had in your mind for the past 7 years? Should we, maybe work on certain spiritual goals that we wanted? And, I want to read the Bible. I want to join a church. I want to start a meetup group. I want to start a new platform. Whatever you want to do. But if you're too caught up just like consuming content in conjunction with everything else that you're doing in your life, and you're not getting to what you say you want to get to, how is that helpful? Right? It's not. So being strategic would be step number 4. Now, step number 5. Ooh, what do you think I'm going to say? What do you think? I want engagement, guys. So feel free to write in. And of course, if you're watching this on the replay, thank you for doing that. And then also feel free to still add in comments, because I still can, see that. I would say the next thing is don't be afraid to expose yourself to content that maybe is new and different for you. So why do I say that? I think a lot of the lack of sensitivity that we have in this world amongst each other is the fact that people don't understand each other's narrative, right? So, I'm a woman, right? I'm a African-American woman. My family is Caribbean. They come from Jamaica. So, culturally, West Indian, Jamaican, Black woman narrative is something that I feel comfortable with. Do I know everything about it? Obviously, no. I still have to grow as a woman. I still have to grow in my Black identity. I still have to grow in my Caribbean identity, right? But doesn't mean that I shouldn't be looking at narrative and content that highlights the Asian male perspective, the Indian woman perspective, the Middle Eastern woman perspective, the trans, community, the LGBTQ, community. No, right? Just because I'm in one space of category doesn't mean that I shouldn't be informing myself about other narratives. Why? Because it's going to give me insight to understanding how other people live in this world. And when I can have an understanding, or at least inform myself of people who are sharing their stories and are putting their stories out there, what does that give me? That gives me compassion. That gives me the opportunity to take a step back and compare how my narrative is different from other people in this world, right? Because again, no one person shares the exact same narrative. Even twins, they don't live the exact same life, right? People are, we're all different, right? But there's so much of us that's the same and that is similar that it's fascinating, right? Like, it's fascinating to find out that you and someone else could have done the exact same thing at the exact same time, 10 years ago, right? But you're never going to know that unless you go out and you seek that content. So be daring, be experimental, right? So that's what I would say for number 5. And we're running over. I've been talking. So just to quickly not wrap up, but continue on with the list. So 5 would be daring, be experimental. Number 6, I would say would be probably choose content that is going to force you to do something, right? So I think that it's great to watch something that makes you laugh, watch something that makes you cry and stuff like that, but also have the intention to want to not necessarily always be an activist, but I do think we all should be activists in some way or form, but choose to do something. I think a lot of times we want that kickstart to go ahead and write that book, go ahead and start that business, go ahead and change that job, go ahead and get that divorce, right? Like whatever you're doing. So I think that, be intentional about active content, right? The content that makes you say, oh, I can't just watch this and sit here. Like, you gotta get up and do something. So go for that content. That would be number 6. And then number 7, I would say is, sharing the content, I think, is how, yes, we have viral content, right, that gets out there, but there's also content that maybe isn't being shared enough, right? And so those are kind of the what do you call them? Kind of the unsung heroes that they don't have to be unsung, that they could be. The more sharing that we do is the more community-like feeling that we develop on the internet space, right? And I think that it's beautiful, and I think that it's important, and it's that same push that we have in this world about like small business and growing that we have to take that approach to supporting content creators, right? So, yes, you love content creators that have 1 million followers, 10 million followers, hundreds of millions of followers, right? But there's also a content creator who could have 900 followers, right? But they're putting out great stuff. Don't be afraid to share that stuff. If it moves you, if it's something that helped you and or intrigued you, share it, right? Because you don't know the effect that you're going to have on someone else. And if enough people begin to do that, we start to get to see more content and we diversify conversations, right? Which similarly speaks to another conversation I was saying about, understanding other people's narrative and other people's experience. And then the last thing is, when it comes to our content consumption, give feedback, but be mindful of the type of feedback we give. And what I mean by that is, so I don't want to say you can't be critical of other people or other people's content, but I think so many people I hear, and even myself, I've experienced, the online bullying, the online negative talk, the online attacks, the visceral commentary. It's not necessary, and it's not helpful. And I don't think it would make you feel better to be writing it. So I definitely don't think the person reading it is feeling better by reading it. So, just be mindful of the type of communication we engage in, because again, the impact can be wider than you think it can be. And in light of how people are behaving, in the sense of we have people who take their lives, we have people in this world who self-harm, we all kind of have this social responsibility to be making sure that we're not, on our P's and Q's, but that we're being intentional, right? And that golden rule that we all learn in school, at least in America, I can speak to the American experience and specifically the New York experience, if you want to be specific, is that, we treat people how we want to be treated, right? So I'm not going to go out here and write, horribleness about someone. And then if I receive that on a YouTube video that I do or on this live stream, then be like, oh my God, how could they say this to me? That's so mean, right? Like that feedback, it's one for one, right? That's how karma kind of plays a role. So thank you for your time. I apologize for going over. I hope that you learned something about some media consumption and how kind of that's going on. I hope you appreciated my tips as to how you can deal with your own personal media consumption. If you want to see more content that I'm putting out, go to dressingroom8.com. I'll put it in the comment at the end of this video. That is, if you go on the homepage, you can see my calendar, and I try to put out a lot of content, right? I enjoy being a content creator. I enjoy being a coach. I enjoy being a consultant. I enjoy being a creative. And, I enjoy wearing many hats because that's the life I choose for myself, because there are no limitations. So I encourage you to watch this full video. And even if you're not watching it live, watch it on the replay. I also upload this content onto YouTube. So if you're more of like a YouTube person, even though potentially if you're seeing this on Facebook, I'm assuming you watch videos on Facebook. Otherwise, hey there for that fun surprise. But, if you also prefer to just watch content on there, I have content on there. So you can just go to dressingroom8.com. You can access all the social media icons. If you want to reach out to me, the best way is probably to just email me and just reach me at Natasha. So NATASHA at dressingroom8.com. And again, I can put the website and I can definitely put my email at the end of this. And, thank you for your time. Thank you for enjoying this content and consuming this. And I hope you continue to have a blessed day. And if you aren't having a blessed day right now, then decide to and make it a good one, because every day it's a gift, really. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.